I'm Sam Roberts of the New York Times, and welcome to the New York Times Close Up. A tumultuous week in New York, and for New Yorkers, the president managed to politicize the tragedy and was immediately rebuked, both for his facts and his judgment. In a moment, my New York Times colleague, Nobel Prize-winning op-ed columnist Paul Krugman offers his assessment of the latest tax plan. Next Tuesday, New Yorkers vote. They get to decide whether we want a constitutional convention or not. Donna Lieberman, the executive director of the New York Civil Liberties Union, and State Senator Liz Krueger discuss the pros and cons of ballot proposal 1. My New York Times colleagues weigh in on the major stories on the backstory, and I'll offer some final thoughts on Coda. But first, New York Times op-ed columnist Paul Krugman, his column appearing Tuesdays and Fridays in the Times. Paul, you wrote recently that if Trump survives, it will be largely because of tax cuts. The Times wrote the other day at first glance that Republican lawmakers unveiled the most sweeping rewrite of the tax code in decades. What is that going to mean for New Yorkers?
Well, it's not a good bill. I mean, I would say it's not a good bill for the country, but it's not. It's kind of particularly not a good bill for New Yorkers of, let's say, upper middle class New Yorkers. I mean, the core of what the Republicans are trying to do here is a huge tax cut for corporations, a huge cut in estate taxes. So a bunch of trillions of dollars in cuts that basically go to people with very high incomes, which they then need to scale that back. They've given up any pretense of actually balancing the budget, but they're trying to cut it to only $1.5 trillion. And so they're looking for pay-fors, which all end up being a grab bag of things that are aimed largely at the upper middle class, because that's where the rest of the money is, including ending of the deductibility of a lot of state and local taxes.
How do we define upper middle class by New York standards?
A lot of this stuff is going to fall on people with incomes of, let's say, between $100,000 and $300,000, which, sounds pretty good. It's not quite as impressive in New York as it is in some parts of the country. But, the big beneficiaries of this plan are all going to be 500, a million above that. A lot of the costs, the places where early versions of this bill, as best we could tell, we're going to actually raise taxes for more people than they cut them. We're going to be in that sort of $100,000 to $300,000 a year range. And the stuff that's being targeted, mortgage interest deductions above a certain level, which is not going to be binding where housing is cheap, but is going to be binding in New York, state and local taxes, which are high here, obviously. All of those things are going to mean that this is a bill that if I might say, it's almost as, almost to think, if you want to say, how do you think about this bill? Think of it as being designed to personally benefit Donald Trump and personally hurt the people sought after by people who advertise in the New York Times.
But you said the other day that this is not going to bring much joy to Republican donors. Why not? Because
even with the enormous sums of money, this is not going to be a life-transforming event for people with huge incomes. If you've got an income of $3 million a year and you get a couple $100,000 extra in tax cut, it's not going to change your life. Whereas, of course, if you have an income of $30,000 a year and the government takes away your Medicaid, which is kind of the other side of what these people are doing, that is a life-transforming event and not in a good way. So it's amazing that we're doing all of this for the sake of people who, pretty much have anything that they want.
You warned about the Trumpization of the Fed, which you said is probably the most important personnel job the president has to fill. He filled it, or is filling it with Jerome Powell, a good choice?
Well, I guess the question is compared with what? So at one level, there is no justification for not reappointing Janet Yellen, who's done a superb job and will be the first Fed chairperson not to have held the office for 2 terms in a long time. And, when she's actually had one of the best track records, and it's hard to think of any reason for not reappointing her other than the fact that Obama did appoint her and possibly that she's a woman. Now, of the other choices, Powell is by far the least bad. He has pretty much gone along with the Fed's good policies. He was not somebody who went through the crisis constantly warning about inflation that wasn't going to happen and fighting tooth and nail against rescuing the economy. So, you know, I'm relieved, disappointed but relieved. This could have been much worse.
What about health care? Is it being dismantled piece by piece?
Well, two things. First, you know, the Children's Health Insurance Program, which covers millions and millions of children, needed to be reauthorized. The expiration date has passed, and nothing is happening. So millions of kids are, you know, because it's administered to the states, the effects aren't felt immediately, but millions of kids are set to lose health insurance unless Congress moves quite soon. And then they're sabotaging Obamacare, but there are sharp limits on how much sabotage they can do. It's kind of interesting. The way it was set up means that certain pieces of it, some of the markets can be undermined, but other parts, the Medicaid expansion doesn't go away, and there are quirks in it. Some people are actually going to get cheaper health insurance because of the sabotage. It's all, you know, this was a system that was designed pretty carefully, and if you just kind of do random, let me screw up what I can, you're going to produce some unanticipated results. But sure, there's going to be, the number of uninsured is going to rise by several million because of what Trump is doing.
You've also written about what's going on in Puerto Rico, or more likely what's not going on. Is there any constituency here for helping Puerto Rico other than Puerto Ricans who have relatives here? Is there any way to convince people that it's important for the mainland economy?
It's a problem. I mean, obviously places where people have personal ties to Puerto Rico, which is here, New York, care. I think there's quite a few Americans who actually, if it's pointed out to them that these are their fellow citizens, and look at, you know, we've basically got almost dark ages conditions down there with lack of clean water, lack of power, then they will respond. But it's not you know, there are no Puerto Rican members of Congress. What Puerto Rico can slide into the ocean, and it's not going to affect the midterm congressional elections.
Right. If this were Iowa, as you said, we'd be a lot more concerned.
And it's fair to, I've also said, you know, if Puerto Ricans were all of Norwegian descent, we'd probably be behaving differently as well. Thanks
to Paul Krugman of the New York Times. You can read his op-ed column in print Tuesdays and Fridays, and of course at nytimes.com anytime. When we return, New York Civil Liberties Union Executive Director Donald Lieberman and State Senator Liz Krueger. Welcome back. Joining us now, Donna Lieberman, the Executive Director of the New York Civil Liberties Union. She is against a constitutional convention. And State Senator Liz Krueger, representing the Upper East Side of Manhattan. She is for one. That's proposal number 1 on the ballot on Tuesday. A Times editorial said that if we have a state constitutional convention, there could be hacks going haywire, a feeding frenzy for lobbyists. Senator, what do you think?
I've been in Albany for almost 16 years. That's a description of the current model of government. Lobbyists and being the permanent government, legislators not getting the people's business done on the big picture issue. The Constitutional Convention is an opportunity, a rare opportunity for us to go back to the drawing board and design a 21st century model of government that will address key issues we are not. Election reform, campaign reform, anti-discrimination efforts, a rational, fair funding model for our public education system. Issue after issue that I came to Albany to fix, I've recognized after 16 years, we're not going to do it, or it would take us another 300 years to get through all the proposals. A constitutional convention allows us to have the people decide big picture issues that should be changed.
If I recall correctly, we last amended the Constitution by convention in 1936, overhauled it wholesale, not since 1886. Donna, people say the legislature could do most of these things by itself if it had the will. But do you really have confidence that it has the will?
Well, it certainly on its own doesn't have the will. But we have succeeded in getting a number of progressive items through the state legislature. The big obstacle to getting good things done in the state legislature is the Senate. No reflection on Liz, I would say. And the problem with the state constitutional convention is that the convention would be made up of delegates, the lion's share, of whom would be chosen based on state Senate districts. And the state Senate districts have been gerrymandered, both politically and racially gerrymandered, to keep the incumbents in power. And if you look at the districts, they are shaped bizarrely. You know, they go like this and leave out this part, you know.
But isn't that because the legislature has been in control of reapportionment and the Constitution may somehow change that?
Well, you know, a constitutional amendment might change it, but the Constitutional Convention is set up so that it won't change that, because it is set up so that the delegates attending the convention and making the decisions about what to put to the people are chosen by a system that favors the incumbents, who are overwhelming, the people who control the Senate now, which is, you know, the GOP and the independent Democrats.
Senator, I hope this isn't too much of a softball, but why can't you run a Bernie Sanders type campaign to elect delegates?
You can, absolutely. And in fact, 2018, which is when delegates would run and be elected, is going to be an amazing year for Democrats in New York State. And even though it is true, it's 3 delegates per Senate district, it doesn't mean the senator controls who those delegates are. It's just a geography. And when you do the numbers math, it shows, because we are a blue state who actually voted against Donald Trump, and it's going to be a very bad year for Republicans in 2018. Worst case scenario is we end up with 60% Democrats as the delegates. Some number of senators, no doubt, from the other party will run and win, although I tell you, it's very tough to run for senator and delegate at the same time and look your voters in the face and say, I'm going to take 2 salaries, thank you very much. So I think most senators will not choose to run. It may be retired judges, retired elected officials, local officials. I think that's all a plus for us if we get people who understand government and what's not working, but want to do the hard work of coming up with recommendations. And of course, the public gets the final bite at the apple, because once there is a convention and a package of proposals are brought back to the people, they can say yes or no, as they did 40 years ago.
Right, yes.
But I want to just go back to the issue of it's just a matter of geography. It's not just a matter of geography. The Senate districts have been shaped so that particular type leaning voters are put into one district and others are put into another district, and how you allocate the voters determines in some cases the outcome.
Let me ask you another question, though.
Sure.
Generally, constitutional amendments have granted more rights than they've taken away. Why are you so worried about this constitutional convention taking things away from people?
Well, I think that if this were to pass, we would see a huge infusion of money and pressure from what Liz calls the permanent government, from the lobbyists, from the DeVos type and Mercer type families who really want to do away with some very important protections. So rather than being able to use this to expand access to free secular public education, we'll see a big push, as there was in 1967, I might add, to end the constitutional prohibition against taxpayer funding for religious schools, for example. I think that we have a lot, you know, we protect unions, the right of workers to organize and be represented by a union in New York State. There has been a nationwide attack on the right of unions to organize.
But again, that would still be up to the voters. Let me ask you both a quick last question. Democracy is messy, but shouldn't things like this be left to the voters?
Well, that's exactly why I support the Constitutional Convention. I know people are afraid that bad people will do bad things. I want to argue that we have a model of government that's not working for us now. We have huge swaths of our populations who were left out of representation under the model we have. women are left out, immigrants are left out, discrimination issues are not addressed. In fact, labor doesn't have collective bargaining written into the Constitution. They think they do, but it's actually just a contract right. It could be put into the Constitution. We don't have the right to clean air and water that could be in our Constitution. So I know people are afraid. There are bad people in Washington. There are bad people with money trying to buy elections. I would argue we're living in that world.
Donna,
Let's
quickly.
fix it.
I think that the people of New York, we have a Republican form of government with a small r, which is that we govern through the people's representatives. And when we get into an environment where we have public referendum, right, deciding every issue, I think we get ourselves into trouble, particularly in this era where big money is so powerful. And I don't want to put our entire state constitution up for repeal and replace, and all the collateral damage that may cause.
Well, you can decide yourself on Tuesday. Thanks to Donna Lieberman, Liz Krueger for joining me, and don't forget to vote. When we return, my Times colleagues discuss the week's lead stories on The Backstory. Welcome back on what had been a perfectly beautiful late October day. Thousands of people anticipating Halloween night. One man decided to alter the landscape irrevocably and is proud of the deaths he called. We're joined by my Times colleagues, contributing writer Clyde Haberman and Eleanor Randolph, Albany Bureau Chief Jesse McKinley, and our new Metro political reporter Shane Goldmacher. Let's talk about that terror incident. It's a far cry from 2001, when that incident really shook up the mayoral campaign. This time, the mayor has reacted in a way that certainly redounds to his strength. Right, Shane?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is timing politically that certainly doesn't hurt the mayor. He was pretty much on a glide path to re-election next week anyway, but it has him standing next to police and law enforcement leaders, the governor working together, and, you know, by all accounts, did a good job. You know, marched with the governor in a Halloween parade, sort of a show of strength that the city hasn't been impacted. You know, politically, there's no question that this is not going to damage the mayor in any way, and frankly, that, you know, I didn't live here in 2001, but the reaction seems so much more muted that this was, you know, the city didn't pause and even take a breath almost when this happened.
As you pointed out in the Times too, the mayor leading up to this point, for someone who had so many vocal critics, who was considered so polarizing, why is he so far ahead in the polls?
I mean, we have a big story coming out this weekend looking at just why is it that this mayor had no opponents. And there's a whole series of answers. Some of them are just plain economic indicators. The economy's going well. Crime has gone down. But a lot of people did look at getting into this race. Hakeem Jeffries, congressman from Brooklyn, Ruben Diaz Jr., the borough president in the Bronx, the city comptroller, Scott Stringer, and nobody could pull the trigger. And there's a lot of reasons. Term limits made holding off really appealing to some of them. They'd have a free shot in 4 years. Big thing, there was a federal investigation into the mayor and his fundraising practices, and a lot of them were just basically holding off hope that he would get indicted, and then they could run, right? It's a lot easier to run against an indicted mayor than
Although
an
that
incumbent
doesn't
mayor.
seem to have much effect in Albany. Clyde?
Well, term limits is a big issue.
Yeah.
These guys are just going to wait it out. And that's one of the great negative effects of having it, and why it should be undone. As for I mean, there's no comparison with 9/11, obviously, or as the president called it a few months ago, 7/11. He is who he is. But it's fascinating. It underscores what a world city we are. Out of the 8 who were killed, 6 were not even Americans, let alone New Yorkers. There were 5 Argentinians who were visiting, and oh God, I'm blanking on
German,
the
I think.
German, perhaps. Anyway,
Belgian.
Belgian, right. And, thank you. And it underscores the vulnerability of everybody in any major city, as it was true in Barcelona, and less so in Nice. But we're going to unfortunately see this again.
To go to Shane's point, though, what I thought was really interesting was how, I mean, it was Halloween. He you know, he decided there'd be plenty of people out on Halloween. But New York still had the Halloween parade,
Right.
and you know, there were hundreds of thousands, I think, of people out there. The crowds were huge. Maybe they weren't as big as they were last year, but there were all these people who were saying, you're not gonna keep me home and hiding and, under my bed because you did this. I am still a New Yorker and this is still my city.
And it was even important enough to get the governor and the mayor to almost hold hands.
Yeah, I was about to say that, it's only on disaster footing that these two guys seem to be able to get along, but, in the day after, the governor was very complimentary of de Blasio about his response, about the police department's response, and the governor had a little dust up with the NYPD the week before over other issues. So it was one of those rare occasions that politics seemed to be set aside. Now, how long that lasts, of course, is an open question, since these two guys are kind of like oil and water.
Jesse, earlier in the program, we talked about the Constitutional Convention. I thought the governor was for it. Is he still for it?
Well, yes, technically. As with a lot of things, Cuomo, he can say that he is for something, but not necessarily campaign for it. You can talk to a lot of Democratic candidates for Senate who would agree that the governor had said, "Oh yeah, I absolutely want to elect Democrats," but then did very little grunt work to actually get them elected. I think in the case of the Constitutional Convention, the governor said early on, "Yeah, sure, this is a good idea. I'm willing to support it theoretically." But, and here was the big but, was, I'm afraid that this might just be the same old legislators doing the same old stuff in the same old building, and nothing's actually going to get done, which was effectively his way of saying, don't vote for it.
So why endorse it then?
Well, because
his father would, come back from the grave if he didn't endorse it. Mario Cuomo, for years, that's all he talked about, was how he wanted New York to have a constitutional convention.
Because he trusted in democracy.
He believed in democracy, and he trusted in even in this sort of one-shot deal democracy with the Constitutional Convention. But he must have just told his son that 1,000 million times. But
what's also interesting about the con in general is that it really is it's a very divisive issue, even in progressive circles, and it is, I did a story on it last week, where what you're seeing is that for liberals, they are terrified in the age of Trump that any sort of direct democracy, any sort of opening up the Constitution to kind of wide-ranging debate could result in losing stuff.
And not just in the age of Trump, if I may interrupt, in the age of Citizens United. And they're just afraid of a cascade of money coming in. Of course, liberals have money too. It can go the other way. But yeah, that's the big fear.
Shane, quickly, you did a piece profile on Chirlane McCray, the mayor's wife, the other day. There had been talk certainly earlier in the administration of why has she got such a big role, a staff, a job, an office. Looking at that in retrospect, is her role disproportionate?
It's certainly disproportionate to any past First Lady of New York City. There have certainly been First Ladies in history that are not in this First Ladyship that have had big roles, go back to Eleanor Roosevelt. But in New York, there's never been anybody like her. She has her own staff. She runs the Mayor's Fund, which is this sort of adjunct nonprofit to City Hall. Actively calls and raises money from people for this. This nonprofit has raised almost $25 million a year. That's going to be $100 million over 4 years. But her biggest influence, frankly, is on him. He listens to her. He seeks her advice. He has her sit in on almost every major job interview. If you were going to get a senior level job anywhere in the New York municipal government, she is part of your interview process. And she asks pointed questions, some of which have made people uncomfortable, like, do you send your children to public schools? Which can be a fraught question for depending on what answer they're looking for.
For a lot of New Yorkers. Thanks to my Times colleagues, Clyde Haberman, Eleanor Randolph, Jesse McKinley, and Shane Goldmacher for joining us. I'll offer some final thoughts in a moment. Nearly half of New York's current population wasn't here in 2001 when acrid smoke wafted over the city for weeks from the World Trade Center. But since then, our world changed in ways we now take for granted. We've gotten used to removing our shoes at airports. We're more likely to say something if we see something suspicious. We reflexively reach for identification in office building lobbies and bump into bollards on crowded sidewalks. We've benefited from incredibly vigilant police intelligence. Also from miraculous luck, considering how little it takes to rent a truck or transform one misfit into a fanatic. New Yorkers have proved remarkably resilient. The city is stronger and safer. And if more stanchions and security cameras suggest that terrorists have won by changing our lifestyle, it's a small price to pay for more peace of mind than most people expect in Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. Those safeguards still lure immigrants, including the accused killer, who turned another magnificent fall day into the city's deadliest terror attack since 9/11. For the record, while statistics don't mean much if you're a victim or no one, the libertarian Cato Institute calculates that your lifetime chances of being killed in this country by a foreign-born terrorist are about 1 in 45,000. Not all of the newcomers make it here, but strivers come because they believe the world's most enduring democracy offers more hope for them and their children than their homeland. Since the Dutch, our tolerance or indifference has made New York unique. And as the nation becomes more diverse, New York is more and more American. We feel intense pride in our city and country, Bret Stephens wrote in the Times the other day, though we don't feel the compulsion constantly to profess that pride as proof of our patriotism or as an expression of cultural resentment. New Yorkers don't scare easily either. Just a few blocks from the rampage, the Halloween parade proceeded as planned. Even the mayor and governor disguised their mutual mistrust and walked the route together. If some people thought the revelry unseemly, the governor offered a ready response. If we change our ways, he said, they win. Our resilience reminded me of a gripping image from 9/11. The photographer and his colleagues were calmly escaping down the stairs in the World Trade Center. A young firefighter was grimly going the other way, climbing up to rescue stragglers. The people in that stairwell were in a state of grace, the photographer later recalled. They helped each other. They didn't panic. Most people are basically good. I know this with certainty because I had gone through the crucible. What a great example people left. Be selfless. Help the person around you and get through it. For the New York Times and CUNY TV, I'm Sam Roberts.